reading your book, you could say, if you are a person who's sort of prone to look at the bleak things, say, well, everybody's been corrupted in some way by this system, and therefore we are really in a bad shape. And taking it another step further, you can say sort of almost the Vladimir Putin view of the West, saying, oh, well, you claim we're corrupt, but look, you have all these other forms. They're just more sophisticated forms of corruption. What's really the difference between your ethical standards and my ethical standards?
Oh dear.
Yeah, well, I throw that out there.
Yes,
You can
no,
respond how you.
That's a hugely important question. We are not Russia and we are not China.
Right.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
Just a couple of words about Putin's Russia. Even under late socialism, late communism, there was a sort of balance of power. I mean, you had the Communist Party, you had the military, and you had the security services. What we are left with today in Putin's Russia is one of those. Essentially, the security
state. Yeah.
The security state. That would be, almost the quintessential security state. You cannot speak of a free media. That's a place where journalists are not only intimidated but murdered. The press is controlled. There are some serious analysts of that country who talk about it in terms of trending towards fascism. We see, some of their objectives in what they're doing in Ukraine and other parts of the former Soviet Union, unfortunately. So we are not there yet. However, our elites, I think, and this is mostly, unfortunately, an elite problem in this country, and it is a problem of insiders and those who have the information and the connections versus outsiders. And again, it's not only happening in this country. I mean, when I give talks in Europe and so on, it is a much wider spread phenomenon with many of the things I've been talking about in terms of including, say, shadow lobbyists. I think that we still can take action. I think we still can protest. I think there are protests that can make a difference, even when we're using some of the tactics that worked quite well under late socialism and that we saw under late socialism. One of them is parody. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, so Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert are examples of that. One of the parallels that we see between, and again, I'm not talking about Putin's Russia, which is a far worse model, but late socialism, when things were beginning to reform and open up, was that there was a formulaic media messaging that went on. And Jon Stewart conveys this when he goes from one television program to another, or one commentator to another, and they're using pretty much the same lines to describe the same phenomenon. So there's this formulaic media messaging, even here today, when there are so many media options that we have, right? I mean, even in this vast information universe, the mainstream media still have this formulaic quality to them. And so what's the response to that? The response is that people look to parody. Because parody seems to be able to tell the truth in a way that the formulaic or the mainstream media doesn't. And so that's a parallel, and these parody actually works as protest. We've seen this in not just Stephen Colbert and others starting their super PACs to highlight this whole, the whole issue of
The fact that you can basically ridicule
Right.
anybody you want is still a big difference. Yes.
Right, it's a huge difference. The fact that we can protest, the fact that it is still possible
Right.
to get into the media. It is still possible to elect Congress people, even though there are so many pressures on them. And I think it is still possible. I do believe we are a can-do society, and I think that we can really come up with creative ideas and some creative solutions.